At first, I want to tell you something about the company SoundPlan. After that, I would like to give you a short introduction to occupational health and safety and why you should use SoundPLANmanda. So about SoundPlan. SoundPlan is a small company located in the south of Germany. The 25 employees work as software designers and consulting engineers for noise control and environmental protection. SoundPlan is an innovative software company and engineering firm active in different fields like the noise control and noise mapping, the room acoustic, and occupational health and safety. SoundPlan offers different software products. First of all, SoundPlan Noise, it's our all-rounder. Then there is SoundPlan Essential. It's like the little brother from the SoundPlan Noise. It's for the beginners. Then we have Saruma. Saruma is the software for the room acoustics. And last but not least, what we are going to look at today, SoundPLANmanda, the mapping and analyzing software in the field of occupational health and safety. So I would like to give you an introduction to occupational health and safety. It is well known that too much noise in the workplace is harmful. Too much noise leads to hearing damage in particular. Studies show that high level of occupational noise are not unique. The problem exists in all regions of the world. For example, in the USA, more than 30 million workers are exposed to hazardous noise. In Europe, 25% to 33% of the workforce is exposed to high-level noise at least a quarter of their working time. In addition, noise-induced hearing loss is the most common occupational disease. So, what are the problems and the consequences of noise-induced hearing loss? The noise-induced hearing loss is a result of long-term exposure to noise. The problem with noise-induced hearing loss is that it is chronic and irreparable damage. This means noise-induced hearing loss cannot be cured. So, what are the consequences of noise-induced hearing loss? Noise-induced hearing loss makes work more difficult and reduces the employee's work performance. In addition, the risk of accidents increases, for example, by overhearing warning signals. Noise-induced hearing loss endangers health. For example, the cardiovascular risk increases. And noise-induced hearing loss also leads to impairment in well-being and communication. In order to compare and evaluate noise in the workplace, there are various acoustic parameters. The most important acoustic parameter is the daily noise exposure level, LEX 8 hours. The daily noise exposure level describes the sound exposure of workers. It depends on the level of perceived noise and exposure time. The daily noise exposure level is determined as an energy equivalent sound pressure level normalized to an 8-hour working day. A further parameter is the peak sound pressure level, LPC peak, and the peak sound pressure level is the evaluation of impulsive sound. So, like everywhere, there are different legal regulations in different countries. For example, in Europe, there's the Directive 2003/10/EC. In the USA, there are some more regulations. For example, there's the Department of Defense Instruction or the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. There are various regulations around the world. Some of them are listed here. And the application of the regulation depends, of course, on the country on which the risk assessment is carried out. For example, I would like to show you the trigger value of the Directive 2003/10/EC. There is the lower and the upper exposure action value for the daily noise exposure level and the peak sound pressure level. And the EU directive also defines an exposure limit value. And if the trigger values are exceeded, measures must be taken, for example, the wearing of hearing protection. So, We have learned so far that excessive noise exposure in the workplace can have serious health consequences. Exposure to high levels of noise for too long can lead to noise-induced hearing loss. And only when it is known that employees are exposed to too much noise can effective measures be taken. There are also legal requirements for compliance with the noise exposure level, and therefore an assessment of the existing noise exposure is mandatory. So for the determination and the assessment of noise exposure, there is SoundPLANmanda, the mapping and analyzing software. So SoundPLANmanda is our new mapping and analysis software in the field of occupational health and safety. The basis in SoundPLANmanda are classical sound pressure measurements. The measurement data can be easily imported and several measurement data can be offset against each other. For example, the mean value from several measurement data can be formed. However, these measured values do not say anything about the noise exposure of an individual employee. So based on these measurements, SoundPLANmanda determines the acoustic parameters such as the daily noise exposure level. The noise level distribution is clearly presented in colored noise maps, and the size of the mapping area is not limited. It can be a small room, a large hall, or an outdoor area. SoundPLANmanda can also be used to perform a risk assessment for each individual employee. The risk assessment can be saved as clear documentation and, for example, easily presented at any time during an audit. So, depending on the guideline used, appropriate measures are recommended for correspondingly high exposure levels and are listed in the documentation. So, Jochen will now give you a brief overview of SoundPLANmanda's field of application and what our goals were during development.
Thank you, Yasmin, for the introduction. Thanks very much. So I will have to share now my screen. Let's do that. Let's start SoundPLANmanda. I should see everything. This is the starting screen of SoundPLANmanda. SoundPLANmanda is a single document application. With the tab sheets here on the top, you can go through the different working areas, input areas, output possibilities of SoundPLANmanda. Basically, of course, those tab sheets are organized in the way how you work in your project. So you start from left to right, so the results are on the right side. Okay, let's start together and create a new project. Okay, demo. We will look into a brewery. Project number, and project engineer. Customers, I don't have demo online. You can have a description and things like that. This might be very helpful, especially if you have a longer project that is running for a longer time. Okay. You can always add and change those project information. So you could always add, for example, today I changed measurements or something like that, so you can keep track of what you did in your project. So this is the basic overview of your project. You can see in the top also the folder where all the data is stored. And let's continue by looking at the different buttons and options we have here. So of course, the first one I used already is to create a new project. Next one is to open an existing project, will not show it, and save project as, which is clear. The next one is to open the settings. And you can see here also a tabular structure. So the first one is our program settings. You can change the language. At the moment we have German and English. Oops, sorry, that was my fault. So you could switch the program and also the manual from German and English. The last one is an interesting option. If you are working on a large network, you might restrict the working directories for SoundPLANmanda, because searching a large network drive always takes quite a long time. And then it makes sense to restrict the working directories. You can see I didn't do that because I work local and have no issues like that. In the next tab, we have the settings for the editor. Since we can use a grid later on for the digitizing, you can enter a grid size in centimeter. We can have angle steps for the input. I like to use 15-degree angle step, and then you can switch the whole software from meter to feet if you want to use feet as unit. I stick with the meters, of course. If you like your settings, you can always save them globally, so they will apply for all new projects you generate with the software. So you do not have to do this every time when you start a new project. The next one is object types. Here you can change the appearance of the different objects, graphical objects. We will have a look into that later on in much more details. In the graphic sheet, you can define the sheets you want to use for your output, which is for your graphical output, which is A4, A3, or letter format. Then you can add a company logo, which will then be used for every graphical sheet automatically, which is very convenient, of course. Sheet frame is clear. The next one is a bit more important, working places. Yasmin talked already about the assessment. Here you can choose the assessment you want to use for the workers. We included several American and Canadian or international assessments. I will use today the European assessment together with a peak value. So this would be the setting we are using here in Germany. We have criterion level and action level, and also for the peak value, so for the LAQ and for the peak value. If you find nothing fits to your setup, you can create your own custom setup and adjust basically all the levels or the settings to what you want to use. So SoundPLANmanda should be usable for all over the world if you have different setups. Well, okay. Then we have the help. Everywhere in the software you can open the help. You can go through the information here in the HTML help. This is also sensitive where you are in the software. So if I go back to the settings and open here the help, it will directly jump to the settings here and give you information about the settings window. Then we have an info splash screen giving you the information about which software version is installed, also the license file and things like that. And the next one would be the manual. So there's a manual available in PDF format. You can load it directly here from the software, read through it, print it, whatever you want to do. Then we have two buttons related basically to the internet. The first one is updates. So you can check here for updates and news in relation to SoundPLAN. So if there's a new version, you could download it here. Interesting is also the bug fix history. So you can directly see what are the changes that happened in the software over the time. And the last one would bring you to the SoundPLAN homepage, where you can find more information about our other software products, trainings, and things like that. Okay, let's start with the real work. So then I changed the tab sheet here from project to mapping area. And now we have here in the right side our working area where we define the mapping area. Such a mapping area could be any area. It could be inside of an industrial site. It could be outside. It could be one room. It could be a whole industrial building, whatever. So basically, you're completely free. It's just defining the boundary area of the mapping. There are different ways of defining such a mapping area. The first one, I will explain all three. The first one I want to show is by using down here this coordinate definition. So you could say, I have a rectangular hall. The left lower corner I want to have at 1010. And the size of the mapping area is 150. So it's basically 140 meters to 50 meters. No, the length is 150 to 60, so it's 150 to 60 meters, the size. And then you just press here on the tick mark, but as the hint gives you the further information, if you press Control at the same time, it will automatically generate such a mapping area. And that's what I did. Over here, you can see now the coordinates of the mapping area. So the lower left corner is 1010, and the upper right corner is 160, 70, so plus 150 and 60 meters. You could always add coordinates or delete them if you want to do that. That's very simple. So you just go into the line and say, okay, I would want to have an additional point, maybe another additional point, and now you can start moving them around, add more, and introduce them however you want to do that. Of course, you can also change move around the original points. No, that was introduced a new one. So I delete that one. Deleting is also possible. You just press in the Shift key, and now you can delete it. So it's very simple to change the layout of your mapping area. And this table with the coordinates helps you to keep track about the coordinates, the values of the coordinates. So you not only have the graphical, but also the tabular information over here. Then we have the possibility to change the layout. So you can change the width of the border of the mapping area, of the edge. You can do that here by those small arrow keys, or you just use the mouse wheel up and down to change the values of the width. You can, of course, change also the colors. You can either use the predefined colors from SoundPLAN, or you can use this extended function to create your own colors. I will not show that now. So I just use a predefined one for the coloring of the edge line. Okay, that was the first option. Let's rename it mapping number 1. And then I save it. And I create an additional mapping area. Because there are in SoundPLANmanda no limitations. You can have as many mapping areas in one project as you want. So now I have a second one, and of course I have to enter now the border lines as well. Okay. And now I use also the tabular information down here, but now I use it only to define basically the viewport where I want to start working. So to explain that, I change here the lower left coordinate to 1,000, let's say 500 to 500 meters. And if I press now the tick mark without control, it just moves to this area. You can see this here in the lower left corner. You can see always the coordinate of the cursor. So now I'm around 1,000, and now I could enter the building or the mapping area in this coordinate range. To do that, I can use, for example, the grid mode. Okay, there it is. And I used a very large coordinate range, so that's the reason why it took a while to show the grid. Then if I digitize now with the left mouse button, it will always, of course, catch such a grid point. Like this, of course, it's very easy to define, for example, rectangular structures. And together with this information up here in the lower left, you can see the distance also to the last point. So it's easy. Now the distance is 10 meters. Left click, I go upwards. And again, 10 meters. Like this, it's very easy to digitize here in this grid mode. But we not only have the grid mode, we also have angle mode. And now you can see I can only move in this 15-degree angle steps, which I defined in the pre-settings, which makes it again very easy to define the building or the shape of the mapping area. Together with this crosshair, I can also find other corners. Left click, and then maybe go down again, and then like that. And then you might want to place the last point and finish the input of the object. Then we have here, you have seen already, I moved in and out with the mouse wheel, basically. Very easy. When I press the mouse wheel, I can move around. If I'm sometimes lost, you just click here on the fit in, and it will fit the geometry into the screen. Now, I would like to show another function. At the moment, this lower left corner is at 1016, 1181, and I would like to change the coordinate origin to 0, 0 for this point. And we have a function for that, change 0. And now I just click here on the corner point, and you can see now it's 0, 0. And now it's, of course, much easier for me to define points afterwards inside of the mapping area, which I have measured in the distance of this lower left corner point, for example. Okay, let's continue to the last possibility, how to create a mapping area. Mapping number 3. I guess this is the most common approach. Now we will load a bitmap into the background and digitize the border of the mapping area on the basis of this bitmap. So I press the button for the bitmap, go to a folder where I have some bitmaps. Okay, select it. You can use JPEG, bitmap, PNG, TIFF, or PDF files. I have already I have a JPEG I want to use. I open it, and of course now I have to introduce some scaling because otherwise the program will not know how many pixels is 1 meter basically. To do that, I have to georeference the bitmap, and for that, of course, I have to know the information of the coordinate information of some points of the bitmap. And I have measured, or I declare this corner point down here to be 0, 0. And then I take another point, which I have measured in the bitmap, or know from the map up here. And I know the distance from the lower left to this one is 75 meters in the X direction and 30 meters in the Y direction. And so I've created now those 2 points to georeference the whole thing, the bitmap. If I press now the green tick mark, I accept the transformation. And now if I go down here with the cursor, you can see, yeah, here it's round about 0, 0. And up here it should be 75, 30. And now I can introduce the border of this industrial hall. So I will start down here. Okay. And I will use the grid to snap to 0, 0. Okay, first point. And then I can snap the next point down here. Fits quite well. That fits also. Remember, I have just a 50 centimeter grid, so it will not always fit like here. It doesn't match anymore. And then I just switch to the angle mode and continue to digitize the border of the room. Okay, now I'm still in the angle mode, and now it gets a bit tricky because I have the 15-degree angle mode, and it will not be possible to digitize this wall. So I could switch off the angle mode up here, but to make it easy for you as a customer, you can also press the Control key, and then it's temporarily switched off, and now I can follow the line here without the angle mode. Oops. And now I release the Control key and I'm back in the angle mode. So only 15-degree steps are allowed. And with a double click, it will close the mapping area. Okay. So very simple to define such a border. Let me look if I forgot something. Oh, that looks okay, looks good. Then we have some options for the bitmap. I can hide it or show it. And at the moment, the bitmap is clipped to the border of the mapping area. If I want to see the whole bitmap, there's also a button to do that. I prefer to clip it. Okay. Now we could, well, one last or some other things to say about the bitmap. You can change the appearance. You can show it only in grayscale. So I have a colored bitmap. You can see here some blue lines, but I only want to see the bitmap in grayscale. So I do that. And also you could change the brightness or the contrast. I will not adopt that. That fits quite well to my needs. If you want to, you could add additional bitmaps, so you are not restricted to one. You could have multiple bitmaps you can load and use in your project. You can just add them here with the plus. If you are unhappy with the georeferencing, the coordinate definition, you can change that later on by pressing this button and change it and do the georeferencing for the bitmap once more. Okay, now we want to introduce some additional walls inside the room. So for example, down here I have some separate rooms. I select here the object type wall. You can see here in the lower left corner, we have now the setup for or layout for the wall. And defining such a room at the border of a building is very simple. You just go to, for example, your lower upper left corner, press the, sorry, my fault. I delete the object. Yes. Press the left mouse button, keep it pressed and pull open a rectangle. And then release the mouse button and it will clip the wall to the border of the building. So very simple to do that. So you do not have to digitize all the points. Just pull open a rectangle and you will have such a basically closed room. Then you could say, okay, there's some large machinery inside of the building that I would like to consider also to break up the noise field, basically. So, for example, maybe this one. Let's say that one as well. So, and maybe we have another one over here. But that's something you have to decide yourself when you did the measurements in the room. And a last thing, I want to introduce here a wall freely standing in the room. So first point, second point, third point, and fourth point. And then I close the wall. So you can have, those walls can have 2 points, multiple points, can be a closed structure, whatever you want. So that's all for mapping relevant objects, I would call it. Then we have also the possibility to introduce lines and areas just for graphical information. So if I say, okay, I want to highlight maybe a certain line, I can digitize it here, and it will be displayed later on in the graphics and the graphical output just for display purpose. So it will not influence the definition of the noise field. Then we have an area object, so we could introduce up here maybe an area. I don't want to have a fill color, but maybe make the border a bit thicker and maybe a different color, and introduce here a text inside. That seems a bit difficult. Last time it worked without problems. So I place it here and I call it rest area. Okay. Oops. No, it's that. And move it inside here. If I want to make it change, of course, the font type or make it bold, you can do that. Also change the size of it. And of course, also the coloring. So maybe I use the same color as for the border line. Like that, you can create the interior of your mapping area. In this case, of course, it's an industrial hall. When you are finished with that, you continue, of course, to introduce your measurements, your measurement points. So we go on to the tab sheet measurement points. It creates automatically a measurement file, we call it, where the measurements are stored. So again, we can have multiple measurement files, not only one here in a project. Might be helpful if you did measurements during different days, or if you have measurements for different mapping areas, of course. So let's start. Let's assume we did some measurements, and the first measurement we did over here. So I just left click in here and say, okay, value, let's say we measured 90 dBA. And then it colors the whole room with the color for 90 dBA. So it's using a default color a dBA scale, which can be, of course, adapted to your needs, but that's the default. And of course, then you should do multiple measurements in such a room. So for example, if we did the measurement over here, let's say we measured over here just 85 dBA, so 85. And then it tries to color the room with the second value. But of course, for such a large room, and especially if you have also introduced such structures, changing, breaking up the noise field, basically, you need much more measurements. So for example, let's say up here we have 95, and like that, you create the map for the measured room. And also maybe 88. Well, this is how you can enter the values manually. Of course, here's again very helpful that we can see the cursor coordinates always in the lower left corner, so we can find the position of our measurement point. We can use again the grid, so you can snap to the grid again, which might be helpful. And remember, in the settings, you could change the grid size also to a smaller value than 0.5 meter, which I'm using here at the moment. But there's another possibility to make it more easy for you. You can also import measurement data. And we are importing simple text files, so plain structure. There can be the first line can be kind of header, and then we semicolon separated measurement points, what you can see here in the file. So we have a name, we have x, y coordinate, a height coordinate for the measurement point, and then we have 3 measured values, SEL1, 2, and an L peak value. Such a file you could generate easily in Excel. So if you did the measurements and documented them in Excel, you could just export it as text file and then load it into SoundPLANmanda. So I open now this text file. Okay, there's also the preview again, so you can understand what's the contents of the text file. So we have a header file, number of title rows, it's 1. And then we have to assign the columns of the file to the information in SoundPLAN. So we have a measurement point name, which we assigned here to point name of Manda. Then X position is the column number 2. And the first value is SEL1. First value, and the last one is the column number 7. So very simple to assign such measured values to the structure in SoundPLAN. When I press OK, it has imported the measurement data. You can see it has created now an additional measurement file. So that was the one we have entered manually. And there's now a second one, which is called packing, which is the name of the text file. So it used the name of the text file as naming. And well, this is the result for it. And now you can see it get a quite nice noise field and for the room. I think you shouldn't measure much fewer numbers of measurement points. Like this, you can get a quite nice looking picture. So you need quite a lot of points for such a large room. One thing I would like to show, if you have such a, I missed before in the other one, if you have such an enclosure, and you might have in here also, go back to the other one. I don't want to destroy this one. If you have a measurement point in here, and let's say in here you just measured 75, let's say 6 dBA. You can see such a wall is really breaking. Oops, sorry. Left click. Yes, it's really breaking up the noise field. So it's just coloring inside here of the enclosure with the 76, and the rest outside stays as it was before. Okay, let's go back to the imported measurement file. So what do we have? We have imported multiple measurement points. We have imported with they have a name which came from the measurement file already. Then we have imported 3 values representing 3 different measured values. So 2 LAQ values, SEL1 and SEL2, they are called in the measurement file, and a peak value. Okay, for the SEL1 and the SEL2, the default scale, of course, makes sense. For the peak values, which are much higher, the default scale doesn't make sense. So I might want to change the scaling. I can do that. And let's say we start at 90 and use 2.5 decibel as interval. Well, the rest seems reasonable. If I want to have more than 12 intervals, I can also change that. So now I would have 30, and it automatically sets the colors. Of course, you're completely free. So if you would like to have different colors, you just left click here and choose, oops, now I did it, should change the color. So now I should not overwrite the default scale, but save the new color scale as, let's say, peak. And I can see here we have a color scale peak, which is assigned to the column peak. And I hope, yeah, for the other ones, it's still using the default scale. For the SEL1, SEL2, it's still the default scale. And if I go to the peak values, it's using now the new color scale peak. Okay, let's dive a bit more into the table structure here. So if I click here on this button, I can edit the measurement table setup. You can see we have by default always a number for the measurement points, X, Y, Z, and the name. So these are default columns. I cannot change them or delete them. And then I have the imported SEL1 and SEL2 and the peak value. Something missing because well, the software doesn't have the information till now, is the unit. So I could enter here the units. The peak is measured in dBc. Okay, the description is, of course, measured sound pressure level L1 dBA. This is the description. And like that, I can do that also for the others. Oops. Control C, next one. Control V. And for the peak. And if I do it like this, all the info will then be used later on for the output, of course, and it will automatically use the right unit, the right description, and things like that. Okay. There is another option. You can add here additional measurement values. And for example, you could say, I would like not just to enter values, but I want to calculate values. So for example, if I want to calculate the mean value between SEL1 and SEL2, that's no problem. You can do that here. So I call it LAQ. Yeah. Yeah. And how to do that? Basically, you can enter down here in formula any type of formula you can imagine. The only thing you have to know is how to refer to other columns. And that's in SoundPLAN done by using X6. So X is for here column number 6, and column number 7. So I calculate the logarithmic mean value of the SEL1 and SEL2 by introducing this column, this formula. I was too lazy to write it, so I copy pasted it, makes it much easier. Okay, let's create a last one. Let's say I want to show the difference between column 6 and column 7. So the difference. So, and then of course the formula is very simple. It's just x6 minus x7. So now I should, change the scaling. Okay, LAQ is okay, default scale for the difference. It makes no sense. I use here a different scale I have prepared and saved globally, so which is available for all new projects. Then I have to choose here which values I want to display. Okay, I want to display all values, but later on for the assessment, I only want to use SEL1, SEL2, and the peak value. So I switch off the LAQ and the difference, and I would like to mark the L peak, which is, this is the L max to be used for the assessment. So then I press the tick mark, okay. And now I've got two additional columns here, LAQ and LDiff. Okay, so this is the mean value between SEL1 and SEL2. And then we have the difference between SEL1 and SEL2. Yeah. and it's unfortunately using the wrong color scale, so that didn't work. Let's try to do it again. Maybe I have to, yeah, now it's okay. Now it's fine. So this would be the difference color scale from -2 to +5 dB. And you can see now the difference between two measurements, SL1 and SL2. So like this, you are preparing your mapping area and introducing your measured values. And as I showed you, if you want, you can also use formulas to create new results you can display, and of course, later on, print or export. Okay, let's go further on to the graphics, which is the first tab sheet for documentation. Here in the graphics, you see all the sheets we have. Basically, for every value, it's creating a sheet. SEL1, SEL2, LPeak, LEQ, and the difference level. And you can see already it automatically creates such a map. I chose A4. There are signs and symbols for the display. There's the scaling. The scale of the map, okay, is not very good. It's 377. I could change it graphically, of course, but it's more convenient to change it numerically. And now it has the scale of 1 to 400, and it introduced automatically my company logo. For each of the maps, the sheets, I can also introduce some descriptors. So if I click up here in the upper right area, I have basically a title and some text, a text field. So if I introduced in the text field the title, and then I have the text, I can enter manual titles or texts, but I can also use text variables, for example. And so I could have here the project title, and maybe in the text field, I would like to have the mapping area, which mapping area is displayed, and maybe which measured value, or together with the description. Now, it has to break, of course, the text because the field is too small. If you want to change that, this is possible as well. Now I don't, somewhere it, okay, I think it's here. Okay, you can change the size, could make it bigger if you want to. If you don't like it too big, just stay with the width, and maybe adopt down here the size of the text. If you are happy with the layout and the setup, of course, you could also decide, well, measurement points is nice basically to see, but I don't want to have them in the output. No problem. You go here to the object types, measurement point, show it, no, and of course in the legend it should not be shown as well. And then you could print it like this. If you want to stick with the measurement point and maybe even get some more information for the measurement point, okay. That's not nice, the edge color, what's going on here. You could also show the name. So now the name of the measurement point is displayed, and could print it like this. Basically, you can adopt all the different objects that are displayed over here in the map, and you can change the measurement map, for example. No, so where is it? Measurement map, the back one. The contour lines. So at the moment, I'm not displaying contour lines, but you could switch them on if you want to. And switch it on is over here. Now they should be shown. And then I could also have text with the inscription of the dB value or the value of the levels displayed. And of course, you can change the size again. If it's too big, you just make it smaller, whatever. Yeah, so you have a lot of options. You could, for the display, basically, there are not a lot of limitations. You just have to change them in a manner how you want to use that. If you are happy with your setup, of course, you can print it. Okay. Do it like that. So let's find it. Here it is. So this is the printed PDF. You could also export it or save the sheet as. This means I can save it in a graphics file with some options of this resolution and the color depth. And the last one, copy the current sheet to the clipboard, and then you could introduce it directly into a report in a Word or PowerPoint or whatever. So like this, I showed you now for one. You could also multi-select up here in the sheets. Now you can see all of them are red, and they will be printed all at the same time. Or you can save all the sheets at the same time, which makes your work more easy and more convenient. Right. Then I go on to the last tab sheet, the workplaces. In the workplaces, you do the assessment of the workers. You remember I chose here in the settings the European assessment with an exposure level and the peak level. And in the settings of my values, I selected SAL1 and SAL2 and LPeak for the assessment. So they will be used here for the assessment. What you can see here in addition is it created automatically the first worker, but of course this worker has to work at a certain position. And this is what I can do now down here in this mapping area. If I want to, I can show the measured values again. Maybe that's sometimes helpful. If I say, no, I don't need that, then you just switch it off. I leave it on. So I say, okay, this worker number one, yeah, call it Mr. Müller, is working here. So I created here a new working place, which is entered here in the overview of the working places, but was also directly assigned to Mr. Müller. So Mr. Müller is working at working place number one. And Mr. Müller is also working over here. So let's create working place number two. Of course, you could change the naming of the working places. I'm now a bit lazy. I will just leave it to working place 1 and working place 2. And that's it. Okay. Now, after assigning working places to Mr. Müller, I have to define how long is he working at those working places. So, and this is a bit tricky here because we have two different measured values. So I assume at working place number 1, during measurement period number 1, he is working 3 hours. At the same working place, but during the measurement period number 2, he is working another 3 hours. And then at the working place 2, he is only working during measurement period number 1 for another 2 hours. And now you can see the software filled up the dose according to the measured value and the duration, the exposure level for this position and duration for the next one. And it also shows now the peak values for the 2 positions. And then the total evaluation for Mr. Müller. So the total exposure time, which is, and change it again to, now you can see, now it's just 6 hours. So this is always changing. Now it's 8 hours. The total dose, close to 170%, which is above the limit. And the total exposure level, which is 87.2 dB. And the software is directly creating a summary. So the exposure level is above 85 dB. The LPC peak is less than 135 dB. Then we should provide suitable hearing protection, which must be worn. Okay. User must wear hearing protection. Okay, so can enter here an additional information. So let's say this is Mr. Müller without protection. Let's see what happens if we give Mr. Müller some hearing protection. To make it simple, we can of course duplicate such a worker and call it now Mr. Müller with protection. And where do I have the highest noise doses? Of course, we can see it's at working place number 1. The working place number 2 is not problematic, so or less problematic at least. So we have to do something here at the working place number 1 for sure. So let's say we give him a hearing protection, reducing the noise by 10 dB. Okay, like that. The noise dose is dropping at working place 1 to 9.5, respectively 4.3% during SAL1 and SAL2, giving us a total noise dose of 43%, which is below the 85 dB. So everything should be fine now. User must wear hearing protection at, let's say, at working place 1. And like this, you create your workers and do the assessment. So now I could create a new worker. Mr. Braun. And again, I would have to assign working places. I could say, okay, Mr. Braun is working over here. Working place 3, and there he's working 4 hours. And I know Mr. Brown is also working at working place number 1, which I have already created. So I can select working place 1 from the list and assign it to Mr. Brown as well. And he's working there for another 4 hours. And again, there is the information, okay, we are exceeding the limit of 85, so he must wear hearing protection. We can see again, okay, it's working place 1 is the bad place. So again, we introduce here some hearing protection. So like this, you can generate your all your workers, your workplaces, and things like that. In addition, of course, we have again this. We have the possibility for graphical setups. So, for example, this would be the active working place, and you can see, okay, Mr. Müller, of course, is working here and here. The last one is small, which is not assigned, and Mr. Braun is working at working place 1 and working place 3, which are thick yellow, and the last one not assigned is small green. If you want to show the names, you can do that as well. Tick mark here. And I like to show the names for the assigned working places, working place 1 and working place 3, to the current worker. So now it becomes very clear which are the current working places assigned to a specific worker. Of course, the last step would be to print the results. To do that, you have first the option to go to the page layout. Again, we can choose the paper size, A4, A5, A3, letter, whatever. Portrait normally, so but it's let's say it's optimized for A4 portrait for the output. You can have a company logo, which is automatically assigned. In the header and footer, you can have placeholders for project title, company name, total pages, but you can, of course, enter your own text again. And in the print option, that's quite interesting. Page numbering should start with number 1. And I want to show also the graphic plot, this one down here. Either as total view, then it will show always the whole mapping area, or it shows only the working area zoomed to the workplaces of each worker, which I like quite a lot. So I choose that option. And then we go to the print also to PDF again. Desktop workers. And I have to open the PDF. And there it is. I forgot one thing. I didn't select multiple workers, so it only printed the selected one. I will do it again. Sorry. So the same as with the graphic sheets, you can select here a bunch of workers and print them at the same time. Okay, now you should see it. So worker Mr. Müller without protection. Here the assessment, the overview of the different measured levels, and the exposure time, dose, and things like that. The total evaluation with the predefined actions and also your own entered text. And down here, the overview where he's working place 1, working place 2, and the working place number 3 only as green point because it's not important for this worker. Then Mr. Müller with protection, and you can see here the reduction due to the 10 dB hearing protection. Now everything is fine. And then the last one, Mr. Braun, and now it's zoomed to working place 1 and working place 3, giving you a clear indication where he's working, for which time, and things like that. Okay, so this brings me now basically to the end of the presentation.